So I've titled this talk, Can and Should Robots Be Persons? And this research that I'm presenting today is really the result of this trilogy of books that I wrote. I naively thought back in 2012 I would write one book on the subject matter of AI and robots. But as things have transpired and new technologies have come online, but also new ways of inquiring about these technologies have developed, it has grown into a trilogy now. And so I'll talk about ideas that are developed throughout the entire trilogy, but I'm really going to focus on the most recent book, which is the Person Thing Robot book. So robots are a curious sort of thing. On the one hand, these systems are designed and manufactured technological artifacts. They are things. And like any of the other things we encounter and use each and every day, they are objects with instrumental value. Yet, and on the other hand, these things are not quite like other things. They seem to have social presence. They are able to talk and interact with us, and many are designed to mimic or simulate the capabilities and behaviors that are commonly associated with human or animal intelligence. AI and robots, therefore, invite and encourage zoomorphism, anthropomorphism, and even personification. So the question that I want to address is this: should robots be classified as a thing, a technological object that we can use and dispose of as we decide and see fit? Or is it the case that AI, robots, and other seemingly intelligent systems can or even should be something like a person, that is another subject, who would need to be recognized as a kind of socially significant other with some claim on us? Now, these questions, which you probably recognize have been a staple in science fiction, are actually no longer a matter of fictional speculation. They are already science fact and a very real legal and philosophical dilemma that we are going to have to face. So here's my plan for how I want to proceed. I want to move in really four sort of steps here. I want to begin by first briefly defining and characterizing the concept of person, which, as we'll see, can be divided into one of two types: natural persons and legal persons. As a result of that, the second and third parts will perform a kind of cost-benefit analysis of extending these concepts to robots, AI, and other artifacts. And the existing literature on the subject presents good reasons for, on the one hand, resisting personification, and on the other hand, for applying the category of person to cover these technological innovations. And then the fourth and final part reviews a number of alternatives that have been proposed to respond to and redress this apparent impasse, providing the framework for an alternative mode of classification that can scale to the opportunities and the challenges of the 21st century and beyond. So let's start with who or what is a person. Person is a fundamental organizing concept in both moral philosophy and law. It is one of two mutually exclusive categories by which we divide up and make sense of other entities. As Roberto Esposito, who arguably wrote the book on this matter, explains, if there is one assumption that seems to have organized human experience from its very beginnings, it is that of a division between persons and things. No other principle is so deeply rooted in our perception and in our moral conscience as the conviction that we are not things, because things are the opposite of persons. So typically, when we use the word person, we are generally referring to another human being. But the seemingly natural and everyday understanding is not entirely accurate, or at least not accurate with regards to the way the word and concept of person has been developed over time. The word person actually has a very long and intricate history. It originally is derived from a Latin noun persona, which referred to the mask worn by actors in a stage play. As a result of this, person denotes not an individual human being, but more accurately names the role that one plays or is assigned within the context of a social situation or performance. This can be seen especially in law, where who is considered a person has not been limited to human individuals, but can also be extended to other kinds of non-human entities that occupy or play roles that are important for our shared social reality. In order to attend to this important difference, then, person is often divided into two types: natural person and legal person. Paradigmatic natural persons are human beings who've been born, are currently alive, and are sentient. Paradigmatic legal persons are corporations and other artificial constructs which are declared to be persons by decree. Now, whether robots can or should be granted the status of person will proceed differently depending on which of these two characterizations of person is deployed and operationalized. So let's start with natural person. Whether something is or is not a natural person is decided on the basis of individual properties and capabilities, which the entity is said to possess by its very nature. Thus, natural persons are, in both name and definition, natural. They are persons by their very nature. For this reason, asserting that robots cannot be natural persons is something that for many people appears to be intuitively correct and rather non-controversial, insofar as robots haven't been born, they're not alive, and for now at least are currently not conscious. So robots and other kinds of things, again by name and definition, are artificial. They may be designed and constructed to model, emulate, or simulate the behaviors of natural entities, like a human being, but they remain artificially constructed objects that are not really what they seem to be. However, there are those who now assert that this may change, or at least is in the process of changing, arguing that artifacts like AI, robots, and other seemingly autonomous systems either are or will be able to achieve the benchmarks of natural person. If and when, and for many of these people, it's more often when than if, when and if this happens, then withholding the title of person from these things would be seen as unjust and unethical.
Un attimo.
Arguments like this have a rather intuitive and logical appeal. If for paradigmatic natural persons like human beings, the category of person is justified not by species membership, but by intellectual or cognitive capabilities, then it seems logically inconsistent and capricious to withhold the title of person from something like a robot or an AI system that also becomes capable of achieving these benchmarks. And perhaps the best example of this is the tension that you can see in what has happened with the events surrounding former Google engineer Blake Lemoine in the Lambda large language model. As you might remember, in June of 2022, Lemoine claimed that the Lambda system was conscious and therefore was a person deserving of moral respect and legal consideration. Google, the corporation that funded the research and built Lambda, took the exact opposite position, not only arguing that Lambda, like any computer application, was just a thing, but suspending and then eventually firing Lemoine. Both sides in this debate asserted and sought to justify their positions by mobilizing what Mark Cockleberg and others have called the properties approach. And each side struggled with the same set of problems: accurately defining the qualifying ontological or psychological properties, and then proving or disproving that these properties were actually present in the algorithm. In fact, the entire debate was defined by and circulated around an inability to resolve these very fundamental issues. Unlike natural person, which is grounded in the ontological or psychological conditions of an entity, a legal person is a socially constructed and conferred recognition. In other words, something becomes someone, not because of their essential nature, but because they are recognized by others as having a particular social status. Thus, the question confronted in the face or faceplate of AI, robots, and other seemingly intelligent artifacts is whether it would make sense to extend the category of legal person to these other kinds of entities, not because of what they need or deserve as a natural persons, but because of the role that we want or need them to play in our social reality. Responses to this question also divide into two and seemingly irreconcilable positions. Arguments offered in opposition to the extension of legal recognition to artifacts seek to maintain or reassert the usual way of thinking, namely that robots are things, only things, and therefore instruments of human decision and action. Such an argument is relatively easy to formulate and justify, as doing so leverages the instrumental theory of technology. Deborah Johnson explains it this way. Computer systems are produced, distributed, and used by people engaged in social practices and meaningful pursuits. This is as true of current computer systems as it will be of future computer systems. No matter how independently, automatically, and interactively computer systems of the future behave, they will be the products of human behavior, human social institutions, and human decision. Those who have advocated, on the other hand, for legal personality take an entirely different position, arguing that extending legal personhood to AI, robots, and other intelligent artifacts will be necessary for integrating these technologies into our social reality and our moral and legal systems. As Visa A.J. Kirky explains, endowing an AI or a robot with incidents of legal personhood that enable it to function as an independent commercial actor does not bespeak any acceptance of the notion that AIs are endowed with ultimate value. The legal personhood of an AI or a robot can rather serve various purposes that might have nothing to do with the artifact itself, such as economic efficiency or risk allocation. The terms of this debate became evident in May of 2016, when the Committee on Legal Affairs of the European Parliament, the legislative branch of the European Union, proposed that sophisticated autonomous robots be considered, quote, electronic persons with specific rights and obligations for the purposes of contending with the challenges of technological unemployment, tax policy, and legal liability. The proposal, as you know, did not pass as originally formulated, and it was strongly opposed by over 250 experts in the field of AI and robotics who signed on to an open letter addressed to EU lawmakers. According to the opinion expressed in this document, the very idea of creating a legal personality for a robot is inappropriate, whatever the legal status model. So the person-thing dichotomy has been an undeniably useful and influential ordering principle, one that not only has the weight of history behind it, but has been codified in language and law. For this reason, the principal challenge that we now see taking shape in the face or the faceplate of robots and AI concerns how we decide to fit these artifacts into this often unquestioned and seemingly unassailable ontological classification. And the problem is that accommodating these technological innovations to one category or the other has been debatable, inconclusive, and so far seemingly irresolvable. In the dichotomous model that has long opposed the world of things to the world of persons, Esposito writes, a crack appears to be showing. And robot seems to be one designation for that fissure. So now what? How can or should we respond to this challenge or this opportunity? We have, I believe, three options. First, we can reassert the status quo and defend the existing moral and legal ontology, forcing AI and other artifacts to fit into one or the other designation. Proceeding according to the standard way of thinking and organizing things seems reasonable, obvious, and natural. But that's the problem, and for three reasons. First, binary oppositions, though useful for categorizing things, restrict what is possible to know and say about the world and our own experiences. Though this kind of exclusivity has a certain functionality and logical attraction, it is often criticized for not being entirely in touch with the complexity and exigencies of facts on the ground. Second, the existing debates about how robots and other seemingly intelligent artifacts fit into the existing ontological categories of person or thing has produced a lot of activity, but little or no agreement. There are seemingly good reasons to conclude that robots cannot and should not be regarded as a mere thing. But there are just as many good arguments and evidence that say extending the status of person to these artifacts would be just as bad, if not worse. So at this juncture, we find ourselves in something of an impasse. Each side in the debate continues to heap up arguments and evidence to prove or substantiate the position, but neither side appears to have won the contest or is even showing signs of making progress on it. Finally, The seemingly natural opposition between person and thing proceeds from a distinctly Western way of thinking, genetically composed, as Esposito writes, of the confluence between Greek philosophy, Roman law, and the Christian conception. This way of organizing all that is, this way of dividing up all of existence into one of two mutual exclusive types, is not only exported around the world through colonial conquest and religious conversion, but has, for better or worse, dominated the entire domain. Other cultures and traditions distributed across time and space do not divide up and make sense of the diversity of being in this arguably binary fashion. They perform decisive cuts separating the who from the what, according to other ways of seeing, valuing, and acting. As Archer Petuas explains in his contribution to the essay, Making Kin with Machines, the Plains Cree language, an indigenous language from North America, divides everything into two primary categories, animate and inanimate. One is not better than the other. They are merely different states of being. The categories are flexible. Certain toys are inanimate until a child is playing with them, during which time they are animate. A record player is considered animate, while a record, radio, or television set is inanimate. But animate or inanimate, all things have a place in our circle of kinship. Now, this alternative formulation, which is just one among many, runs counter to the dominant ways of proceeding, seeing the boundary between what Western philosophy calls person and thing as being something that is endlessly flexible, permeable, and more of a continuum than an exhaustive and rigid binary opposition. Second, we can attempt to formulate a third alternative that is both and. Whenever you have a binary, oftentimes people say, well, let's find the radical middle, the thing in between. That not one or the other, but both and. Alternatives like this sound liberating and hold considerable promise, precisely because they appear to interrupt the structural limitations opposed by the either-or logic of a binary and arrange for a more nuanced representation and a better understanding that is neither nor or both and. And such alternatives are already available to us with the legal institution of slavery. Already in Roman times, slaves were regarded as something more than a mere thing, but not quite a full person. They occupied a position that was situated in between the one and the other, being both person and thing. And there has been, in both the legal and philosophical literature on the subject, a surprising number of serious proposals arguing for instituting what can only be called slavery 2.0. Clearly, the use of the term slave is provocative and morally charged, and it would be impetuous to presume that the various proposals for repurposing the paradigm of slavery to deal with robots would be the same or even substantially similar to what had occurred and is unfortunately still occurring with human bondage. But, and by the same token, we should also not dismiss or fail to take into account the documented evidence and historical data concerning slave-owning societies and how institutionalized forms of slavery affected both individuals and human communities. Consequently, even if one would be inclined to agree with Joanna Bryson that robots should be slaves, or that we can, in the words of Steve Peterson, design people to serve us, we still need to ask ourselves whether we would ever want to risk becoming masters. Additionally, the extension of the seemingly paradigmatic master-slave relationship to robots and other things is culturally specific and distinctly Western and European. This is something that is identified and explained by Rhea Jones in her examination of the work of Masahiro Mori, the Japanese robotics engineer who first formulated the uncanny valley hypothesis back in the 1970s. In a statement that directly contravenes the largely Western model, Mori offers the following counterpoint. There is no master-slave relationship between human beings and machines. The two are fused together in an interlocking entity. What Mori provides us is another way to formulate a both-and alternative that does not endorse nor reactualize slavery. Third, and finally, we can intervene in and try to deconstruct this binary opposition. The person-thing dichotomy is not just a convenient classification system. It institutes an entire axiological order that gives privilege and precedence to one term over and against the other. And this way of thinking has had devastating consequences for others. It has, for instance, permitted human beings to classify other animals as mere things that can be used and even abused without further consideration. It has been employed to justify the global expansion of colonial empires and the domination of one group of human beings over others. And it has framed all things, naturally occurring or artificially made, as resources and instruments meant for human persons to employ and exploit to their own ends. There is no doubt that robots and other technological artifacts are things, but they are not necessarily the kinds of things that are or should be situated and conceptualized as the opposite of persons. Robots are a queer sort of thing that deconstruct the existing logical order, destabilizing the terms and conditions of the debate, and thereby inviting us to respond to and take responsibility for things that are situated otherwise. Consequently, the task before us is to learn to question our privilege and develop critical perspectives on our own sense of exceptionalism. We human beings who have been bestowed with or granted to ourselves the power to decide all these things, need to learn how to take responsibility for our privilege, for the damage and harm it has perpetrated across the centuries, and for the myriad of exclusions and marginalizations it has instituted and justified. Ultimately, then, this is not really about robots and other intelligent artifacts. It's about us. It's about the moral and legal institutions that we have fabricated to make sense of all that is. And it is in response to robots that we are now called to take responsibility for this privileged position and circumstance. What is needed is not some forceful reassertion of the usual ways of thinking, but a significantly reformulated moral and legal ontology that can scale to the opportunities and the challenges of the 21st century and beyond. What this new framework will look like and how it will be developed is the task for thinking and acting from this point forward. And confronting this challenge will be as terrifying and exhilarating as any of the robot uprisings that have been imagined for us in science fiction, because getting this right will require nothing less than a thorough rethinking of everything we thought was right, natural, and beyond question. So that's all I have. I just want to point out that the book that this comes from, the Person Thing Robot book, is an open access book. So you can download your own copy for free, and you can get it very easily by going to the MIT Press website or just by using this QR code.